Hello and welcome to another episode of Top Deck, the series where we take a look at some of the leading TCG deck lists. And on today we have Lloyd, who managed to make first place at a recent UK regional. So this is his 60 card Orcust, Sky Striker, all of the cool stuff in here deck. If you've had a look at the deck that won YCS Sydney, the concept is fairly similar. You know, they've got the scrap abilities with the Orcust combination. They're going for a very big card count in order to reduce the likelihood of drawing the sort of brick or the garnet cards. And in an attempt to make it more consistent, you have loads of draw cards. So you've got, in this case, things like the Desires here, the Engage, the Allures, Orchestrated Return. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different senders in order to get all of your combos going. And then an interesting thing that is actually included here is a third copy of Nightmare. So a little bit more depth on this list then. So very high hand trap counts. We have 2 Nibiru, 3 Ash, 3 Dedecrow, 2 Skullmeister, 3 Phantasme if you want to count it as a hand trap, and then also 3 Infinite Impermanence within the main deck. Looking at the side deck, there's also the Typhoons here. Very interesting choice, that one. And Triple Lancia, so even more hand traps available within the side deck. This seems like a really hand trap heavy deck list, but because it's 60 cards, you do have to increase the number that you actually have available. In a sense, Skullmeister and Dedecrow are sort of, you know, pseudonyms for one another, if you want to think of it that way. And then another interesting thing here is the lineup of dangers. So one of the comments he made was that you're able to start your combos really easily because of things like Scrap Wyvern and, you know, any Orcust card plus a danger, or just discarding the right Orcust card off a danger is your full combo. So for that reason, he really liked including these dangers within the deck. Anything else to comment on? Not really. I guess it's the sort of general lineup of Sky Striker cards, except you can afford to play a 4th target for Engage because you have so many cards in the deck. Just the one Crescendo, I guess, that's an interesting one because he didn't want to play an additional copy. We did see some previous, like 40 card versions of the list actually playing 2 Crescendo around Nat's time. But I guess, you know, the format has evolved quite a lot since then, so you probably don't need the second one anyway. Looking at the extra deck, triple Galatea, 1 Longyesu, double Dingyesu. We've got 1 Scrap Wyvern for all of the cool scrap combos. Very easy to get into this, you just need 2 monsters with a scrap amongst them. The Kagari, the Barricade Borg, IP, Phoenix Unicorn, Cerberus, Appaloosa, and the 1 Borosword for your OTKs. In the side deck, we've talked about the Lanciers and Typhoons a little bit. He's got tons of spell trap removal in here actually, so there's the searchable jamming waves here, then triple Twin Twisters, triple Cosmic Cyclone, and the 2 Typhoons are all back row removal or spell trap removal in a sense. And then alongside that, you've got the Call by the Graves for when you know you're going to go first and you need to do it with hand traps, or they're just really generically good in things like the mirror match or against like Salamangre, stuff like that. So I guess there are a few sort of key points we should probably bring up in discussion from him, but that's the list itself. If you want to use it right away, then you can head into the description, grab the download link from there, and play with it right away. Let's grab his commentary. Then that's probably the next most important thing. So he decided to play 60 cards because he got incredibly frustrated with constantly drawing the Scrap Golem. Fair enough, you know, sometimes you just do play a deck where it includes 1 Garnet and you hate seeing it, so you may as well reduce that chance as much as possible. He messed around with a lot of different numbers. Slowly Desires was being added into the deck and it just ran really well. It constantly overwhelms the opponent. All you need for the combo is Scrap Recycler, or Engage, or a Danger alongside it, just so that you can like build up the Scrap Wyvern combo. Sometimes you can even OTK through a Lancia, which gives this deck a huge edge over the mirror matches. He said he also played a lot of hand traps because the draw power just makes it so that your opponent can never actually get into the game, and you have tons of 1 card and 2 card combinations to either outright win the game, or just set up a position where you can't really lose as long as you back it up with a hand trap. If the ban list does hit Babel though, he says it doesn't really matter very much, as a lot of the time he preferred to go for Crescendo anyway. Obviously it is very hand dependent, but Appaloosa plus Crescendo and a hand trap is quite hard to break for most decks. If the Striker engine is hit, he would just play more Dangers, which is fair enough, although they're less likely to be able to special summon apart from the second copy of Tsuchinoko, because there's only one in here at the moment. Yes, it's probably going to be weaker post-ban list, but depending on what actually gets hit, you should still be stronger than everything else until the next few releases come out. You know, Ignition Assault and the Legendary Duel set won't necessarily replace this as being a top tier meta deck on their own. It does really depend on how the ban list operates. I asked him a little bit about the extra deck and some of the other options that you could have had. He said that Bomber probably would have been the 16th slot, but more often than not, Zerberus is basically the same thing as both that and Trisbana. You just have to be careful when you make it for obvious reasons. Sadly, to accommodate the Wyvern and the Appaloosa, you have to make a couple of sacrifices. He even missed the Shizuku once. That is another thing that's been in pretty much every striker list that we've seen so far. The fact that you can, you know, if you can't make your plays start initially, you can use a Shizuku to end up in a very good position, but obviously there's no space for it in this deck. So that's an unfortunate thing that he's had to cut it out. He also said that Callby is just something really extra for going first to stop the Lancia. It's super defensive in the mirror match when you have to start, and you just have to be careful. And you can also use it for Salaman Great decks, where it's very strong there as well. He says he's always liked Typhoon. He thinks that Evenly is too high risk with Lancia. You can say the same thing about Cosmic Cyclone, etc. But you can at least set the Typhoon. You can set the Cosmic Cyclone and chain it if they do Lancia you, which is not too bad at all. Also, the Typhoon doubles as a hand trap versus Pendulum, and it can be something that you draw into in order to out Imperial Order, which every now and again an opposing deck will play. So let's move on to the rounds then. We don't have a dedicated siding strategy, but I think it's reasonably clear what you would be putting in and taking out. Generally just hand traps for back row hate, basically, is what it boils down to, or hand traps for hand traps in some cases. So for his rounds, round 1 he played against Cosmo. Game 1 the opponent started and he was able to be Lloyd was able to OTK him. Game 2 he had a Cyclone for the opponent's Cosmo Town and they couldn't get anything going, and then he just OTK'd him again. So not too difficult, that one. Round 2 he played against 6 Samurai FTK, won the die roll, made the normal combo, and his opponent scooped, not showing him what he was actually playing, so a bit of a mystery at that point. And then game 2 he FTK'd Lloyd. So, you know, yeah, it is a legitimate deck. 6 Samurai FTK can actually win games. Game 3 Lloyd opened a pretty strong hand and also had Cosmic Cyclone for the opponent's gateway. That's just the entirety of the game. If you get that, you win. Round 3 he played against Sky Striker Orcust. It was a very intense match. They were close to time in game 3, but a crucial impermanence set in the correct column won him the match. Round 4 he played against Invoked Mech Knights. This guy made top cut and was the guy's only loss was to Lloyd in this particular round. And Lloyd wanted to mention that he did play very well, but Lloyd won the die roll and went first. The opponent plays lots of strong going second cards and breaks apart the setup and then OTKs him. Bit unfortunate in game 1. Game 2, Lloyd made the opponent go first, having Phantasme for the opponent's Almirage play, and then drew some insane stuff off it, including Desires for the turn, and then OTK the opponent from there. And then game 3 was very tense, very close to time. So the opponent had a board of Elysium and Macabre, and an Alistair in hand. Very, very strong, that board, actually. You could just wipe so much off it. And then he was faced with Lloyd's Afterburner in hand, which he'd had all game, and then he drew a Desires for turn. Desires got him into Greffa plus Wand, and then he was just able to OTK from there. Pretty nuts draws off that. Round 5, he played against his friend Lewis, who is a very strong player who just missed out on top cut, using Striker Orcust. And he says, honestly, Lloyd just drew much better than Lewis in games 1 and 2. He had very strong defensive cards, and basically both of Lewis's hands just lost to one hand trap, while Lloyd's hands had big advantage in both games because he had Engage and the Scrap Engine and everything going for him. And then the next round, he played against Striker Orcust again. Game 1, the opponent did not respect the Nibiru at all, which you probably wouldn't expect in 60 cards, so fair enough there. And then he just got OTK'd, and then in game 2, it's quite even, but Lloyd manages to eventually get a strong draw, allowing him to OTK at the end there. So the final round against Lunalight Orcust, game 1, the opponent opens a really strong board. Lloyd has no hand traps for it. So he tries to play through it, but the opponent's setup is just way too strong. And then in game 2, Lloyd opens just as ridiculous as the opponent in game 1, so the opponent can't break it. And in the final game, A hand trap on the opponent ends him with not very much, so the opponent just has Imperial Order on Lloyd's Desires. So Lloyd takes a look at his hands, decides to let the opponent keep it, and break apart the field and set up as they are close to time, and he knows that the opponent will take damage and not be able to play and play any strong spells, because the opponent plays a lot of spells anyway, and the only thing they can really do is top deck a well-timed Crow, is top deck into something, and a well-timed DD Crow from Lloyd on the opponent's Harp Horror seals the game, and seals him a first place victory at this regional with this insane looking 60 card Orcust Skystriker Danger Scrap combination deck. So that's it for this deck profile. If you've got any comments or suggestions that you want to make, leave them in the comment section down below. Let me know what you think about this list. Give it a go on Dueling Book, and if you're looking to get some money off of your YuGiOh purchases, head to www.tier0games.com, use the discount code Yazzie5, and you will get 5% off all of your purchases. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.